Hey class, Prof JC here. I'm really excited about the mental model that we're going to talk about this week. This might be one of my favorite mental models. I've been saving it up for you, and so I'm just going to share my screen from the beginning, and we're going to dive in, and we're going to talk about this mental model. This could be an absolute game changer for you. I know it has been for me. So let me see if I can just make this larger here. I'm sharing the screen. Now this has caused me a little bit of a problem in recent weeks here. Let's go to view, slideshow, play from the current slide. Voila, there we go. Okay, so we are ready to go. Put myself up here. Okay, so here we go. This one is called, okay, now get ready for this. Okay, this could be a game changer for you, for your organization, for your team. If you can grasp this concept, I promise you it's going to be a game changer in your life. Creative destruction and the law of entropy. Creative destruction and the law of entropy. So just a real quick reminder about what we're doing here. We're talking about mental models, okay? And you've seen this example before here, where we talk about most people go from information. Well, I guess most people go from information to emotions, and then they make a decision, right? And that's why if you look back at some of the worst decisions you've made in life, it's because you got those emotions in there. What we want to work to is take out the emotions. You go from information to mental model to decision, okay? And that's what these mental models are. And so this mental model that we're going to talk about is really important. Now, we've got to start by talking about this, the law of entropy. Right? So I think this is like the second law of thermodynamics. It's called the law of entropy, and here's how it goes, okay? Entropy is gradual decline. Gradual decline. It's, I guess the best example I can give is if you go buy a brand new car right off the lot, okay? Immediately, and you know this, and this is why most of your dads, moms, people you looked up to probably recommended don't ever buy a brand new car. Get one that's at least a year old with low mileage. But the moment you drive that car off the lot, the value decreases. The price goes down, the value decreases instantly, right? So that's kind of an example of this. But just in life, right? There's always gradual decline. You're born into this world, and up to a certain point, right? Like your brain stops forming around the age of 25. Your body, I would say this, I'm 44 and I'm starting to see things now. And like in the last 4 to 5 years, I'm starting to see things that I never saw before. I'm slower. It's harder to lose weight than it is. It's, I'll be in the gym trying to compete with the next guy, with the 26-year-old kid, next to me. And I'm suffering for it for a week and a half, and he's fine, right? So that's what happens when you get up to, my age, because I'm now on the, and I hate to admit this, but I'm now on the downhill slope, right? Now, I tell you, my life is still growing, and I'm not going to, that's what we're talking about here today, right? That's why this is an important mental model for us. But the reality is that gravity and age and all that stuff, it's now starting to work against me, right? 44 is not old, but I'll tell you this scientifically, it just means that I'm at a place where your body starts moving in the opposite direction. I'm not like I was when I was 18. I find today I struggle staying up late at night. My mind just starts going, right? Around 10 a.m. or about 10 p.m. It's like ding dong, time to wake up. Like let's think about all the stuff we need to, that I should have been thinking about at 6 p.m. or at 3 p.m. And it's like And back when I was 18, 19, 20, it wasn't a big deal. I could stay up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, wake right back up at 5 or 6 in the morning and knock it out, just nail it. It's not the same now, right? If I have a night where I stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm struggling for a week, right? It's just differently, right? So it's the law of entropy. Gradual decline is always at work. Now, here's what we're going to talk about. In a closed or isolated system, the process of entropy is accelerated. This is very important. Okay, in a closed or isolated system, the process of entropy, which is that process of gradual decline, is accelerated. Okay, so let me explain what this means. Isolated, closed, and open systems. So here we go. Okay, now most of these podcasts you're able to kind of walk away, but if you get a chance, I want you to come back and look at the screen, because I want you to see this so you can kind of understand kind of what we're talking about here. An isolated system, we see all the way over here on the left-hand side of the screen, is where you've got a closed-off system, okay? Nothing's coming in and nothing is going out, okay? right? So you can't. So here's the best example I can give. Back when I was a kid, I grew up in a real small town in Indiana, and we went to a small church, and we just had some weird people that went to our church. They were all good people, and they were, have some good memories, but we just had some weirdos. And one of the families that it wasn't a family, it was an older couple, and they were good people. They really were. But I couldn't stand going to their home because they hoarded everything. And I remember going to the home, and it just had a weird kind of a smell to it, right? The windows weren't open, the doors, like you might get in and they shut the door behind you. Basically, it was an isolated system. Nothing was coming in. These were the kind of people who bought a couch, maybe in 1950, and it's 1980, and they're still sitting on the same couch. Probably the bedrooms were the same. The house just never changed, right? It was an isolated system. They'd buy trinkets or buy things, but they wouldn't get rid of anything. So it just stayed isolated. And what you saw in that home, it's almost like when you walk into a hoarder's house, right? It doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. There's no life happening in there. Plants are going to die quicker in that home. There's no sunlight getting in. It's just everything. And I remember that's what their home was. They'd keep the curtains were drawn all the time. They just had the TV on, and they it's just kind of a weird situation, but it's how they live. So I'm not judging them. I'm just using this as an example for you. That was an isolated system. There's no growth going to happen there, right? And even if you brought another human being into that place, that was not the kind of home where there's going to be growth, because there's no isolation, right? Well, it's completely isolated. There's nothing coming in and nothing going out. Right, so that's the best example that I can give. A closed system is when you have things that can kind of come in, and I actually should change that, but they can't exit. Right, so a closed system is when people can, something gets in, but it doesn't come out. So this might be the person this might be the better example of the hoarder. They're bringing new things in, but they're not exiting anything out. Right, so they're not getting rid of anything. An isolated system, really nothing. They set it up. Maybe the house gets set up in 1950, right, with all the furniture, and nothing comes in and nothing goes out. It stays isolated. But you walk in 30 years later, and it's just absolute decay. Right. A closed system is when you're bringing new things into it, but nothing's but you're not getting rid of anything, right? So you're bringing things into it, such as maybe new furniture, you're bringing new trinkets into it, but you're not getting rid of anything, right? So that's a closed system. So the law of entropy is still going to work there. It's going to work a little bit less because you are bringing new things into it, right? The doors are opening sometimes, the windows are opening sometimes, but you're not getting rid of anything. What we should have in our lives, in our teams, in our organizations, is what's called an open system. And that means you're constantly bringing in new, and you're constantly getting rid of the old. You're constantly bringing in the new, you're constantly getting rid of the old. This is the process that we want to move to, and this is what we're going to see is going to be kind of the definition of creative destruction. And the only way we can have an open system in an organization or our home, or whatever it may be, team, we have to be very intentional about it. Because the reality is all the way over here, most people don't live in an isolated system. That's very few and far between. Most businesses aren't isolated. I mean, you might go to small towns. I can go to towns right now. I can go back to my hometown right now, and there are businesses that are still running their same business the same way they did 30, 40 years ago. But it's an isolated business in an isolated town, right? So they kind of get away with it. You can't get away with that and move into a bigger city where there's a lot more competition, right? It doesn't work that way. Closed system, this is the biggest fear for you. This is the biggest fear for me, is that we bring in new things, but we're not getting rid of the old, right? Think of on a personal level. Maybe you say, I want to lose some weight, or I want to gain some muscle, or whatever it might be. I want to run a marathon. And so you're adding some new habits, but you're not getting rid of the old habits. So the old habits are, I don't drink a lot of water. The old habits are, I don't get the amount of sleep at night that I need to get. The old habits are, I keep eating too many sugars and processed carbs, all the old habits. So maybe I'm lifting weights, maybe I'm getting out, I'm running, but I'm never going to reach peak performance because I'm not getting rid of the old stuff. Open system is what we want, even on a personal level, right? So you say, hey, I want to run a marathon, so now I need to bring in new habits, but I've also got to get rid of some of the old habits, right? This is how change happens in life. It's one of the most exciting things, and it's something I try to do on a yearly basis. I try to do it on a monthly basis and even weekly basis, is sit down and look at the system that is my life physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, relational, and then I also add my house on there as well. I try to look at all those areas and say, well, what are the old things I need to get rid of? And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but I'm trying to always create an open system, and I want the same thing for you, that you would become an open system, but not only just for you, but that your team would become, that your organization would become, that one day you would teach the same principle to your people, okay, that you would teach the same mental model to your people. If some, and so here's the point I'm trying to make. If something is not growing, you've got to look at that and say, am I an isolated system? Am I a closed system? Or am I an open system, right? Is my team an isolated system, closed system, open system? Is my organization isolated, closed, or open? Okay. This is going to define whether you're going to be able to grow or not, whether you're going to be able to continue to go to the next level. This idea of creative destruction. Okay. So the law of entropy as a mental model, and that's what we're talking about today. When something, anything, is in a state of accelerated decline, you are witnessing a closed or isolated system. You must ask yourself the question, okay, this is key right here. This is key right here. You must ask yourself the question, what new information, people, or experiences could be added to make this something, this anything, whatever this is, an open system? Okay, so anything in your life that's in accelerated decline, if it's a team you're leading, organization, maybe you've been a part of an organization that's not growing, it's not moving, the question they've got to ask themselves is, first of all, are they a closed or isolated system? Which one is it? And then you got to come down and ask the next question, what new information, people, experiences could be added to make this something, anything, an open system? So this might be, say, for instance, you're leading an organization, you're leading a business. Let's say you're a small business, you've got 30 employees. But let's say you got 30 employees, and 29 of those employees have been there for 40, 50 years, and they're not learning anything new. You're still using the same computers that you used back in 1980, right? I mean, this is unthinkable, but it does happen out there, right? You're still using the same computers from maybe the 1990s. You're still using the same structures and terms and practices and same products from 1990. You're not upgrading anything. As a business owner, you've got to stop and say, okay, I'm struggling. There's more competition coming in this area. So here's the question, what new information, people, experiences? And that might mean there's going to be new information you have to bring in, right? You're going to have to go out there and study your product, your service, what are the coming trends, and what do I need to change? You might have to change up some of the people. That's always a hard thing, right? You might have to say, hey, you sit down with your people. Obviously, this is leadership here. So you sit down with your people and say, hey, well, we're raising the standard, and you got to be able to meet the standard. If you can't meet the standard in the next 6 months to 12 months, then this is not going to be the place for you. You might have to bring in new experiences, right? That's kind of changing up your service or product offerings, whatever, that might be. Whatever you have to do to create an open system, that's what's really important here, okay? So this idea of creative instruction, we've talked about the law of entropy. Everything is always gradually declining. It declines faster in an isolated or closed system. What you want to do is create an open system, and how you do that, creative destruction. This is intentional. Creative destruction is the dismantling of long-standing practices in order to make way for innovation, and is seen as a driving force of capitalism. Now, maybe you don't like capitalism, I understand that, but I just need you to understand this is what the United States is really built on. This is what innovation is built on. It's saying what is old, what's not working anymore, how do we innovate on that, right, and make something new. Steve Jobs is a great example, right, of creative destruction. How in the world, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, no one could have ever imagined that on one little device that you can fit in your pocket would be your phone, would be a video, would be your camera, would be thousands of songs, thousands upon thousands of songs, would be a map, would be all the things that we use our phones for. No one could have ever imagined that that's where you could pay things, right? You can go to the gas station, hold your phone up, and you can pay for gas. No one could have ever imagined. Steve Jobs may not have imagined that from the very beginning as well, or maybe he did. I don't know. But here's what I knew. He began the process of innovation. Right. And, we all had Walkmans back in the day. You may not remember that. You might be too young to remember this. But back in my day, I'd go running or go for a walk outside and have to put on a Walkman. And you'd have a cassette tape or a CD. And the thing would bounce the whole time. So you couldn't get in a rhythm because your CD would be bouncing up and down the whole time. And so it'd be scratching up the CD or cassette or whatever it was. And you'd have these awkward, they were like this size right here. You'd have these awkward headphones on your head trying to run. Nowadays we just put in these earbuds, right? And you put in your phone, you could attach your phone to your arm or whatever somewhere on you, and you've got thousands upon thousands of songs or podcasts or videos, all this stuff on this little machine, on this little phone right here that you and I have. It's unbelievable to me that that's how it works, right? That's creative destruction. Steve Jobs didn't really invent anything, but he innovated on what was already there and brought all this stuff together into one thing. That's this process of creative destruction, right? So here's some examples right here. Let me see if I get myself out of the way here. Creative destruction examples. The internet is perhaps the most all-encompassing example of creative destruction, where the losers were not only retail clerks and their employers, but also bank tellers, secretaries, and travel agents. Now, I'm not saying that these people were losers, but they lost in the game of capitalism because innovation is always at work. Creative destruction, right? The mobile internet added many more losers, right? And I'm saying losers in the game of capitalism, right? From taxi cab drivers to map makers, right? So look at all this. Back in the day, back when I grew up, this is what you would see. If you wanted to call a cab, you'd call them up, and because they had no competition, they might take, in a small town like I lived in, they might take 45 minutes to get to your house because they don't feel like, getting there. Nowadays, there's a lot more competition, but back in the day, it was just a yellow cab. If you wanted to go and cash your check, you'd have to go to a bank. Nowadays, there's some banks where you just take a picture of your check and it cashes it for you. There's direct deposit, right? All this stuff can be done on their phone. You had to go to travel agencies back in the day. I remember that. I remember we'd have families that would take vacations and they would set up an appointment with the travel agent and they'd go down the street, and we'd have, like, in our small town of 30,000 people, there might be 5 or 6 travel agents that made a good living off of that because that's how people plan everything. Nowadays, you don't have to do that. Everything you got, all the prices and all stuff right there online. You'd have to go to the grocery store, right? It didn't come to you, but nowadays it came to you, right? So these are all examples of creative destruction. This right here, this picture right here it's probably my favorite outside of Bruno Mars. This might be one of the best Super Bowl halftime shows I've ever seen. Definitely better than this year's. That's just my opinion. Creative destruction examples, right? So the winners beyond the obvious examples of programmers might be just as numerous. The entertainment industry, as all of us know, was turned upside down by the internet. I remember this. I remember when MP3s, I didn't know what that was, but they first started coming out, and you could buy one song at a time, and you could download these songs, and there'd be a lot of illegal downloading and all that kind of stuff. You could get it from that into your phone or into your little iPod or whatever, and you could run around. It was amazing. It was so exciting when we first started seeing it happen. So the entertainment industry was turned upside down by the internet, but its need for creative talent and product remains the same or greater. So that's the thing you need to understand. We can't be scared by this. It doesn't mean at the heart of it that whatever the product or whatever the product or service is that you're selling, it doesn't mean that that's going away. It just means you have to figure out new ways to get it out there. So for instance, I'm a teacher, I'm a trainer, right? I do corporate training out there in the corporate space. I teach here at Point Loma. But I've always got to be figuring out new ways to be teaching. I've got to always, be figuring out new ways to kind of get the information out there. That's how it works. The internet destroyed many small businesses, but created many new ones online. And so that's the key, right? With this idea of creative destruction, it's scary because it means that you've got to be ahead of the game and realize that things are always, always, always changing. So you've got to constantly be asking, again, am I an isolated system, a closed system, or am I an open system? And what am I bringing out and what am I getting rid of? That's the biggest question you've got to ask yourself. What new am I bringing in? And this is a weekly, right? I would say daily. You need to be asking yourself this question. But if you don't want to do it daily, do it weekly, right? What new am I bringing in? What old am I getting rid of? What new am I bringing in? What old am I getting rid of? That's creative destruction, and that's how you know you're going to stay on top of the game. Here's the question I have for you. I want you to get it personal. I'm the only one who reads this, okay? And I promise, I promise it stays confidential. You share what you feel comfortable with, but here's what I want you to write about. In your own life, or you can say your own team or organization, well, what are some things that you're seeing right now? Okay, you can make it personal, or you can make it organizational or professional. What are some things you're seeing right now? Oh, well, first I want to ask this, right? In whatever you're talking about, if you're going to talk about yourself, if you're going to talk about your team, you're going to talk about your organization, product, service, whatever it is, I want you to first say, is it an isolated system, a closed system, or an open system? Okay? Now, if it's an open system, and that's where we want to get to, with the thing you're going to talk about, whether it's you as an individual, your team, or your organization, a product or service, what are the things that need to be gotten rid of, and what are the new things that need to come in order for you to go to the next level, for your team to go to the next level, your organization to go to the next level. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. So again, I want you to look at your life, your team, your organization, a product or service, whatever it may be. You get to choose. Is it an isolated, closed, or open system? And what new needs to go in, and what old needs to come out of it. Okay. So I want you to be transparent in that. I want you to really think about that in your own life. Where can I implement creative destruction so I can go to the next level? I hope you've enjoyed this video. I love this topic right here. I think it's one of the most important topics that we can talk about, and I think it'll be a game changer for you. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.